Today, I'll be explaining this drama, Hyperknife. A 17-year-old genius girl in Korean neurosurgery was supposed to have a bright future but ended up conspiring with a wealthy conglomerate to give up her spot for further study in Boston. Furious, she stormed into her mentor's office, and from then on, the mentor forbade her from ever setting foot in the operating room again. Consumed by rage, she grabbed a tube and strangled her mentor, almost killing him, but was stopped by a fellow senior student. Without the mentor's approval, she would later pay a heavy price. Years later, she went underground, secretly performing surgeries on the black market. With her incredible skills, even major crime bosses feared and respected her. If any of their underlings spoke loudly, they were ruthlessly berated. But even so, there were still those unafraid of death who challenged her. One day, a woman, a nurse brought in to help, learned of the grudge between her and her mentor and used it to blackmail her for a huge sum of hush money. The wrong doctor wasn't operating inside a hospital anymore. Not wanting to get entangled with the nurse, she considered just paying her off. Faced with direct blackmail, she simply nodded in agreement. The scheming nurse had no idea that death was creeping closer. Soon after, the crime boss was discharged from the hospital, with everything appearing normal. But she never told the boss about the nurse's blackmail. She wanted to personally deal with the woman. After packing up, she made an excuse about needing to send one last box to the boss and had her assistant deliver it. Halfway there, the assistant sensed something was wrong. Recalling that the nurse had been blackmailing her friend, because only the assistant knew, anyone who crossed her ended badly. The assistant stopped, opened the box, and found it filled with garbage, realizing the seriousness of the situation and rushing back. Meanwhile, the nurse had drunk water laced with anesthetics and collapsed. When she woke up, stumbling into the room, she finally found her missing backpack. Just as she lightly touched the money she had blackmailed from her, someone grabbed her tightly from behind. The lingering effects of the anesthetic left her powerless. The nurse slowly stopped breathing. By the time the assistant rushed back, everything was already over. The next day, she returned to her peaceful life, working as a pharmacist in a small town, seemingly away from the world. However, she was still being watched by her old mentor, who had hired a private detective to track her down. The mentor didn't have much time. After driving her away, he had developed a brain tumor. Because the tumor was dangerously located, even the best doctors couldn't guarantee survival or preserve his ability to perform surgery afterward. In all of South Korea, besides himself, only she had the skills to operate on him. In order to save his own life, the mentor personally came to find her. Facing the mentor she once admired the most, and now hated the most, appearing before her, Seok-hye realized the mentor wasn't here for a friendly visit. Sure enough, as expected, the mentor took out a video recording of her performing surgery for the crime boss and used the same method as the nurse, blackmail. He threatened her, demanding she perform surgery on him. Without waiting for her agreement, he turned and left, just like in the past, telling her to wait for his notification. Before she could continue venting her anger, the mentor turned and left, because he didn't have much time left. If his condition worsened, he would have to inject himself with a special drug immediately, otherwise his emotions would cause his hands to tremble uncontrollably. He accidentally dropped the medication to the floor. Seo came out of the room, looking at the mentor coldly, the same way he once looked at her when she had knelt at his door, begging. Now he lay twitching on the ground under her gaze. This girl, a genius, was accepted into Korea's top medical school at just 17 years old. But she never listened to any mentor, because she only acknowledged one person, Director Deok-hye, who was about to return from Boston, the strongest neurosurgeon in Korea. The day Director Deok-hye returned to the school, she impulsively barged into his office. Before he could even speak, she slammed a test paper filled with correct answers onto his desk, a paper that no one else at the school had managed to solve. Director Deok-hye gave her a perfect score and his full approval. Back at the dormitory, she stared dreamily at the perfect score paper like a girl in love. The next day, as Director Deok-hye left the lab, she ran up to him in the pouring rain, begging him to teach her everything he knew. Perhaps moved by her persistence, or perhaps charmed by her raw talent, Director Deok-hye agreed. From then on, they spent days and nights immersed in study. Time passed quickly, and the day came to announce the list of students going to Boston for advanced studies. Everyone was certain that she would be chosen. But when she saw the list, she found that the name on it was not hers. It was the son of a powerful conglomerate family. Furious, she stormed into Director Diake's office, questioning why an idiot had replaced her. What she didn't realize was that the chaebol heir was sitting right there. Director Diake ordered her to apologize to him. But she, stubborn as ever, not only refused to apologize but even insulted his mother. From that day forward, for the next year, Director Diake forbade her from stepping into the operating room. One day, she performed a surgery without permission. Upon finding out, Director Diake stripped her of all her medical qualifications. After that, she left school and disappeared into the black market. Now, she worked quietly as a pharmacist in a small town. If someone upset her, she would kill them, even if they were a heavily monitored criminal. One day, as she walked out of the pharmacy to eat, she noticed from the corner of her eye a suspicious-looking man staring at her maliciously. The next day, the same man, a convicted sex offender, came into her pharmacy. He said her coldness and disregard for her mentor's life showed that she was no ordinary woman. According to him, a tough woman like her deserved to be with a real man, like himself. He proudly revealed his ankle monitor and claimed that as soon as it was removed, he would take her to Seoul to drink and experience the nightlife. Just as the pervert was stepping out, loud shouting erupted from across the street. He was seen shoving a cleaner to the ground and beating him up, relying on the fact that everyone was too scared of him to intervene. But Seoke didn't call the police. Instead, she calmly walked to the pervert's hotel and ordered a few dishes, making it impossible for him to accuse her of anything. The pervert thought he had successfully caught Seoke's attention and became even more arrogant. He had no idea he had already fallen into Seoke's trap. From that day on, Seoke went to the hotel to eat every day. The pervert couldn't even focus on his meals, greedily savoring the scent Seoke left behind. He even started crouching beside her house at night, spying on her. But everything was within Seoke's plan. The time was ripe. It was time to close the net. The next day, after causing a big scene again, Seoke returned to the restaurant and deliberately left her umbrella on the table, waiting for the pervert to chase after her to return it. Not wanting to miss the opportunity, the pervert eagerly caught up. Seihe smiled and said, "Thanks. Good night. See you tomorrow." These simple words made the pervert ecstatic. The next day, he excitedly rode his bicycle towards Seoul, completely unaware that Seoke had already prepared a drugged drink and was tailing him by car. After the pervert drank the beverage, Seoke made an excuse asking him to help carry some stuff. Panting heavily, he managed to move the things into the house. Seoke then gently pulled him onto the sofa to rest, teasing that his beard would poke too much and telling him to wait for her. Right after she left the room, the pervert fell into a deep sleep. When he woke up again, he found a sock stuffed in his mouth and his body tied up tightly like a dumpling. The last thing he ever saw was the face of Sue, the woman he had been obsessing over before he met his end. After tidying up the pervert's corpse, Seoke carried it up the back mountain to bury it. But halfway through digging the grave, a blinding light suddenly shone on her. It was her mentor, who, after seeing his student kill and attempt to bury a body, not only didn't call the police but even reminded her, "The body's not buried deep enough." The reason the mentor was willing to cover for her was simple, because Seoke was Korea's most gifted neurosurgeon. Years ago, when the mentor was operating on an old friend, the original surgical assistant mysteriously disappeared. Seoke perfectly stepped in as a replacement. However, when the mentor asked Seoke to hand him a scalpel during the surgery, Seoke deliberately handed it blade first, slashing his palm. Director Diake didn't scold her. He was simply puzzled. How could a genius make such a basic mistake? In the end, the role of lead surgeon was naturally handed over to Seoke. The surgery was completed swiftly and flawlessly. Yet, instead of receiving praise, Seoke was only met with one question from her mentor. "Why did you do that?" It turned out Seoke had long seen through her mentor's intentions. Though on the surface the mentor and her old friend appeared to be on good terms, Seoke had caught the subtle traces of resentment between them. The incident during surgery could easily be passed off as an accident, making it the perfect crime. Seoke's guess hit the mentor's heart dead on. But a man as proud as Director Diake would never admit he had attempted murder. Because of this confrontation, Seoke's standing in director Diake's eyes plummeted. He isolated Seoke from the operating room. Seoke had no choice but to work in the black market as an unlicensed doctor. Now, the mentor turning a blind eye to Seoke's murder, even helping her cover it up, was because he had a brain tumor that only Seoke could remove. The mentor hoped Seoke would operate on him, even promising multiple times to reinstate her medical license. But the proud Seoke would never accept such a humiliating deal. She even said she wanted to personally watch the mentor's reputation fall to ruins. Yet before Seoke could strike back, the mentor made the first move, using his connections to get Seoke's current pharmacy shut down. Being once again at the mercy of the mentor made Seoke furious. She decided she would no longer be manipulated. At that time, Seoke believed she was destined to win this year's top medical prize. The founder of the award, Chairman Hyunho, had a son suffering from a rare brain tumor. Originally, Director Diake was the only surgeon capable of operating, but now he was too ill to perform surgery. Seizing this opportunity, Seoke took the initiative to visit Chairman Hyunho, showing her footage of her performing surgeries on the black market. She analyzed the chairman's son's condition based on the video, saying it would be an easy task for her. Chairman Hyunho knew how tricky the condition was. One wrong move, even brushing against a blood vessel, could mean instant death for her son. But Seoke confidently said, "I will not even touch a single vessel. I am the only one who can save your son." Chairman Hyunho asked why Seoke would help her. In response, she pulled out a magazine featuring director Diake on the cover, hinting at her true motive, revenge. Chairman Hyunho realized Seoke might truly be the only hope for her son. However, faced with Seoke's ugly conditions, the chairman simply opened the door and asked her to leave. The next day, Seoke returned, questioning the chairman. "Is fairness more important than your son's life?" But the answer remained, rejection. Time quickly passed, and the day of the prize ceremony arrived. As the host announced the final winner, everyone's eyes turned toward director Diake. But the winner turned out to be an unknown doctor, a complete surprise. Chairman Hyunho secretly found Seoke, and together they boarded his private jet back to Japan, preparing for immediate surgery. Just as Seoke had promised, despite the chairman's deep worries, the difficult surgery was a complete success, and Seoke got to see the public disgrace of her former mentor. It turned out that before the prize ceremony, Chairman Hyunho had accidentally mentioned Seoke to director Diake. Director Diake had enthusiastically endorsed Seoke's abilities, even staking his own reputation as a guarantee. This was the reason Chairman Hyunho ultimately trusted Seoke. Seoke had unknowingly fallen into the mentor's trap once again. Realizing this, Seoke was filled with bitterness, and she began to recall what had happened all those years ago between them. Having his son replace her had only been the beginning. Seoke's true goal was to punish the mentor. Soon after, the police approached Director Diake for assistance in a bizarre case. An unidentified corpse had been found, the very nurse Seoke had killed earlier. Would Director Diake reveal Seoke's involvement? Meanwhile, a young girl, having skipped school, was walking alone on a dark path, unaware that a middle-parted-haired creep was following her. The moment she pushed open the door to her house, he forced his way in. If it had been any other girl, disaster might have struck. With lightning speed, she drew the spring-loaded knife she always carried, and in 0.03 seconds, plunged it precisely into the man's carotid artery. The next day, Director Diake came to find the truant Seoke tried to make up some excuse to get rid of him, but the mentor noticed the injuries on her face and barged into her home. As soon as he entered, he saw the corpse lying on the ground. Se thought everything was over, but instead, the mentor simply asked, "Can you handle getting rid of the body by yourself?" After Seoke gave an affirmative answer, Director Diake calmly got back into his BMW and left. Before leaving, Seoke happily promised she would never skip school again. From that day on, she unknowingly fell in love with the thrill of killing. But there's no such thing as a perfect secret. Eventually, the police found the corpse of the nurse Seoke had dumped. Seoke was even at the scene, admiring her own artwork, when she spotted her mentor watching from a distance. Remembering how she had recently ruined the mentor's awards ceremony, Seoke worried he might expose her. So she deliberately approached the police, casually mentioning how she raised many Rottweilers, which explained why the police dogs were so obedient around her. The mentor was shocked to see Seoke appear at the scene and immediately pulled her aside, questioning her recklessness. But Seoke showed no fear. She believed the mentor was colluding with the police to threaten her into performing surgery. In retaliation, she said she would find evidence of the mentor's past crimes. That day, Seoke brought Youngju to a psychiatric hospital to investigate the death of old Jin. She showed old Jin's photo to a staff member. The man recognized him immediately, noting a distinctive circular scar on old Jin's head. He also mentioned that someone had visited old Jin frequently. Seoke's eyes lit up. She quickly asked if that visitor was Director Diake. But to obtain solid proof, she requested access to the old security footage. She offered the man 3 million won, and he promised to deliver the footage that evening. However, night fell and no one came. The man told them to go home and wait. Turns out, the man was planning to scam them out of the reward money. A scuffle broke out between Youngju and the man. Unable to match the young man's strength, the old man was quickly knocked to the ground. When things calmed down, Seoke helped clean the old man's wounds, only to notice a ring on his hand. It was the same ring old Jin used to wear. Seoke instantly understood. The old man was hiding something crucial. It seemed more and more likely that Director Diake had killed old Jin. At that moment, Youngju also noticed the ring. Mistaking the man for his father's murderer, he attacked again. Their fight spilled outside into the rain-soaked grass. By the time Seoke rushed them to the hospital, the old man had already died. Meanwhile, Director Diake received news from Seoke. The police had found animal hairs at the crime scene, specifically Rottweiler hairs. This was enough to reasonably suspect Seoke as the killer. To help Seoke clean up the mess, Director Diake deliberately sped home, asked his butler to prepare dinner and then leave, so that the house's surveillance system would capture his presence and give him an alibi. Then he quietly drove out in his Rolls-Royce, using the excuse of picking up a police officer. At the same time, he called Seoke out, telling her the police had discovered dog hairs on the body. Director Diake said, "As long as you help me remove the brain tumor, I'll erase all traces of this lead." Hearing the threat clearly, Seoke immediately countered by revealing that he knew about Director Diake's murder of old Jin. Now, both master and student were tied to the same sinking ship. Once again, their conversation ended in bad blood. The next day, the young police officer who had discovered the dog hair didn't show up for work. Detective pulled up the officer's last call logs and phone location history, and was shocked to find that the last person the officer contacted was Director Diake. But by then, it was already too late. Detectives summoned Director Diake for questioning. Director Diake calmly admitted that he had planned to meet the officer but said it was cancelled because the officer had claimed to feel unwell. Right then, the detective's assistant called to report that they had checked Director Diake's home surveillance footage and spoken to the butler, confirming that Director Diake had been at home the entire night. With no solid evidence, the case temporarily closed. In the days that followed, Seoke's assistant avoided her with all kinds of excuses. Seoke received a desperate call. A gangster boss, who had once received illegal surgery from her, had captured the assistant. Seoke rushed to the scene, only to find her assistant beaten to a pulp. The gangster, furious about the police investigations into the dead nurse, demanded answers. Se confessed that she had killed the nurse, promising not to let the gangster take the fall. In exchange, the gangster asked Seoke to kill someone for him, a man named Min, who had tipped off the police. Only by accepting this task was Seoke able to take her battered assistant home. Meanwhile, Min contacted Director Diake. Min's men had bribed corrupt cops and obtained footage proving Seoke's black market surgeries, along with details linking him to the nurse's murder. Min used this evidence to blackmail Director Diake, forcing him to cooperate with the criminal underworld. For Seoke's sake, Director Diake agreed. He even brought Min to his home, where Min mocked him, saying, "Who would have thought someone like you would betray everything for a student?" Though Director Diake remained expressionless, the insult burned deep inside him. When Seoke returned home with her assistant, she was met with a horrifying scene: fire trucks surrounding her house. Her beloved dog kennel was engulfed in flames. Remembering the ominous warning Director Diake once gave him, Seoke realized immediately it had to be the professor's doing. Furious, Seoke called Director Diake and arranged a meeting. Director Diake thought Seul had come around, ready to perform the surgery. Instead, the moment Director Diake's car arrived, Seoke rammed into him at full speed, sending the car flying nearly 10 meters. Seoke glared at Director Diake from behind the wheel, revving the engine to ram him again. Director Diake, understanding Seoke's anger, stepped calmly out of the wrecked car, stood behind it without fear, and locked eyes with her. Despite the rage boiling inside her, Seoke hesitated. After all, this man had once been her mentor. Even someone like Seoke, who killed without blinking, couldn't bring herself to crush Director Diake completely. The next day, Min found Seoke again. This time, he used Seoke's growing debts to blackmail her into accepting another job. Boiling with rage, Seoke approached Min from behind, ready to strangle her with a phone cord. But like before, both of them had leverage on each other. Seoke had no choice but to agree. This time, however, the mission was even more dangerous. They would set sail for international waters, and the target was said to be a man as revered as a god. Worse yet, Min had arranged for someone else to assist Seoke on this deadly mission. This person is none other than the man Seoke hates the most. It's all because Seoke did something foolish. After killing someone, she left dog hair at the scene. Director Diake, to help her cover up, burned Seoke's loved one to death, which almost led to Seoke beating her to death. If it weren't for the assistant next to her, everyone on the ship might have been killed. Now, they are sailing to international waters to perform surgery on the largest cult leader in Korea. The officer called to threaten President Min, saying he must cooperate with the police, or even the crime of the missing officer would fall on him. So, all they can hope for is tonight's surgery. The chief surgeon is still the most prestigious Director Diake, but Seoke always wants to show off, which bothers the old man. However, after Seoke explained everything smoothly, the old man trusted Seoke's ability and even got outmaneuvered by him. Before the surgery started, Seoke worried about Director Diake's condition and asked if they should switch positions, but the always arrogant Director Diake refused to admit that he couldn't do it. After administering the last stabilizing injection, Director Diake changed clothes and entered the operating room. With perfect coordination, everything went smoothly at first, but Director Diake's condition still flared up, and his right hand started trembling. Everyone was shocked. Seoke suggested switching places, but instead of retreating, Director Diake casually chatted, saying he had always been grateful to Seoke. Their relationship had always been cold, but now, Director Diake suddenly said something that left Seoke puzzled. Before meeting Director Diake had never thought teaching could be such a wonderful thing, and it reignited his love for neurosurgery. After the surgery, Seoke watched her tired mentor walking ahead and felt conflicted, almost unable to catch up. She asked Director Diake if this would be their last surgery together. Director Diake only smiled at Se. At the same time, because Seoke didn't want to operate on Director Diake earlier, Director Diake's assistant contacted Alan, who was abroad, to discuss Director Diake's condition. Seoke's brother, seeing that Director Diake had been absent for several days, thought he was visiting due to illness. After getting out of bed, Seoke remembered the condition she had agreed upon with the gang leader and prepared to kill President Min. Meanwhile, President Min, for his own safety, had contacted Officer in advance and decided to reveal Seoke's involvement in black market surgeries. Just as both sides were about to take action, Seoke's brother called to tell her that Director Diake's condition had worsened, and he would soon die. As Seoke was shocked, a familiar figure took away President Min, and he stared at the bloodstains left on the ground. Seoke then understood that all along, it was only her who hated the other person, while Director Diake had always been behind her, solving everything for her. Seoke, in order to save Director Diake, is willing to kill a police officer. Thinking about what his brother said about Director Diake only having a month to live, Seoke desperately wants to perform surgery on him. Looking at the brain scan her brother sent her, She realizes that Director Diake is already in a critical state. And on the other side, the officer discovers President Min's body. Through forensic analysis, it is found that the wound was precisely made in the spleen area, and if the spleen is punctured, it will cause massive bleeding. However, there were only scattered bloodstains at the scene, indicating the killer had high surgical skills, which made the officer uneasy. The image of a person immediately flashed in his mind, and through the surveillance footage, it was discovered that a man had taken away President Min. From this, the officer confirmed that the person was Director Diake, and he arranged to meet with him that evening. The officer went straight to the point and voiced his suspicion, mistakenly thinking that the people Seoke had killed and the surgeries done on the black market were all the work of Director Diake. This guess was exactly what Director Diake wanted. He just wanted to die in peace, facing all the black violence in his last moments. But the officer did not expect that Director Diake had already prepared for this and said he had evidence that could destroy to the officer. This statement immediately wiped away the officer's arrogant attitude. The next day, the officer returned to the police station. Remembering Director Diake's words, his anger grew stronger. He decided to find the evidence that would incriminate Director Diake. The next day, Seoke and Director Diake attended Old Jin's funeral. Seoke asked Director Diake why he killed Old Jin. This made Director Diake feel helpless towards Seoke, but he still revealed the truth. Director Diake killed Old Jin because Old Jin had set his eyes on Seoke, wanting to take her to a hospital in Los Angeles. But Old Jin was just a businessman, only focused on making money by having doctors perform endless surgeries. Director Diake didn't want Seoke to suffer that fate, and because of Old Jin's attitude, Director Diake decided to take action and kill him. Later, Seoke mentioned that she wanted to perform surgery on Director Diake. Hearing this, Director Diake was flattered. Director Diake then said he didn't want Seoke to give up. He didn't want Seoke to stop, but Director Diake still cared about his pride, which upset Seoke. Seoke ordered Director Diake to stay put and wait for her to find an operating room to save his life. Although Director Diake didn't say a word, he still felt overjoyed by Seoke's concern. Soon, with the help of Dr. Han, Seoke found a surgeon who met the requirements. Just as she was about to call Director Diake to inform him, she was brought to the police station for questioning by the officer. Under the surveillance footage of President Min's murder, the officer discovered Seoke's figure. Through his investigation, he learned that Seoke had previously had a falling out with Director Diake and had her medical license revoked by Director Diake. That's why she had been performing surgeries in the black market, including the nurse who had been killed. Everything pointed to Seoke being the perpetrator, and Director Diake was just covering for her. However, since there was no substantial evidence, Seoke was questioned for 3 hours before finally being released. She then informed Director Diake about finding the operating room. The exhaustion in her voice made Director Diake feel something was wrong. His assistant, who had been secretly tracking Seoke, passed on the information about the investigation to Director Diake. At this point, Director Diake only wanted to kill the officer. The next day, Seoke waited in the operating room, but the person who walked in was Director Diake's disciple, Alan. Seoke initially thought that Director Diake didn't approve of this operating room. However, when Alan pulled out a pill from his pocket, Seoke suddenly realized that Director Diake had been taking a medication. This medication could temporarily stabilize his condition, but the cost was that the surgery would have more complications. Moreover, Director Diake had secretly scheduled the surgery for a month later, in the same operating room where Seoke had been expelled by Director Diake. Enraged, Seoke stormed to Director Diake's villa, but it seemed that Director Diake had anticipated this and had already packed up and left. At that moment, Director Diake was preparing for his final revenge. He called the officer to meet him at a warehouse. When the officer arrived at the warehouse, he discovered a body chained to the floor. It was the small police officer whom Director Diake had killed to protect Seoke. Just then, Director Diake appeared behind the officer and played a recording. The recording revealed that the officer had bribed Alan to destroy key evidence in the case. Director Diake had brought Alan from America for this very purpose. This way, Even if the officer had evidence of Seoke's crimes, he wouldn't dare to act against him. With his body deteriorating, Director Diake made arrangements for Dr. Han to take care of him during his final month. Dr. Han didn't understand why Director Diake insisted on waiting a month for the surgery. Director Diake explained that by then, Seoke would be beyond saving. Director Diake told Dr. Han that he and Seoke were similar. Seoke was like a perfect surgical machine, only feeling pleasure from performing surgeries, with patients in his eyes nothing more than objects. Director Diake wanted to use his own life to make Seoke experience the pain of losing a patient. After hearing this, Dr. Han was persuaded by Director Diake. Meanwhile, Seoke, in search of Director Diake, recalled that the gang leader had promised to help her. So, she asked the gang leader to help find Director Diake. As expected, the gang leader, with his influence, soon found Director Diake. The gang leader intended to bring Director Diake back, but after hearing what Director Diake had to say, he was deeply moved by his willingness to sacrifice himself in order to elevate Seoke to a higher position. This is the official news where the officer have formally issued an arrest warrant for Director Diake. After seeing the news, Seoke called him and arranged a meeting. She didn't want Director Diake, who was close to death, to take the blame for these criminal acts. She personally admitted it to the officer. However, the officer told her that the arrest warrant was just for show. They had reached an agreement with Director Diake. When Director Diake was close to death, he would call them, and they would arrest him at that time. The Korean court wouldn't prosecute someone who's already dead. This way, Director Diake could take the blame for Seoke, and the officers wouldn't have their own dirty deeds exposed. Seoke threatened the officer, warning him not to harm Director Diake. If something happened to him, Seoke would confess and expose everything the officer had done. At this moment, the officers were left helpless, staring as Seoke got into the car. Just as the car started moving, the officer crashed into the side of the car, disorienting Seoke and her assistant. He then dragged Seoke out and tried to cut off her hand to prevent her from performing surgery on Director Diake. Luckily, the assistant followed closely, clinging tightly to Seoke. But both were too weak from the crash to resist the officer. Soon, the assistant lost all strength. At this critical moment, the gang leader received a call from Seoke and welcomed the storm that was coming. Director Diake arrived and found the officer lying in the trunk of the car. He walked up to Seoke and, as before, asked her seriously if she could escape from the officers. This time, however, Seoke's answer was different. "Can a little boy like you even survive?" she said. Seoke realized she was no longer the wild, carefree girl she once was. Director Diake smiled with relief. However, Seoke still didn't understand why Director Diake would do this for her, and she couldn't bear the thought of Director Diake sacrificing his life for her. She tried to drag him to surgery. But this time, Director Diake had changed. He even used a cane to knock Seoke down. With that, Director Diake put down his phone and told Seoke that he would contact her before he died. Seoke could only helplessly watch as the professor left. Soon after, they met as promised. The outcome of the surgery remains unknown. However, Seoke, as usual, was performing surgery in the black market. When she encountered a problem during the operation, Dr. Han asked whether he should take it over. Then, with a familiar sound of footsteps, Seoke smiled in a way she never had before. Seoke and his master reconciled, with no more obstacles between them. Perhaps there will be a second season, we'll see. Thanks for watching and drop a heart if you love the series.